Ever since I can remember, I've always loved the serenity of nighttime. The tranquility it offered never ceased to draw me in. One fateful night, however, would forever change how I perceived that calm darkness. The moon was a silvery disk in the sky, casting long shadows on the empty road. It had been a late-night study session at Jake's. With the wind dancing through my hair, I trudged towards home. My parents were out of town, and I had to manage alone. As I rounded the corner, the unnerving crunch of gravel underfoot amplified in the silence of night. Then I saw him. A man hunched over on the side of the road. Large and broad-shouldered, everything about him screamed menacing, but it was the sight of a limp body at his feet that turned my blood to ice. "Hey, kid," he said, spotting me. His voice was as gravelly as the road we stood on. There was no missing the fresh blood staining his hands. He stood between me and the body, as if to hide what he'd just done. I stood frozen, my mouth drying up, and phone clutched tight in my hand, as he hastily explained, "Some punk did this. He ran off before you came." His eyes bore into mine, but there was something off about them. Something false and predatory. I slowly nodded as I stepped back, swallowing hard, trying to convey that I believed him. I didn't, but in this moment what other choice did I have than to try and go along with it? "Holy crap," I said. "That's awful. I'll go and call for help." As I turned to leave, I reached into my pocket to grab my phone. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw the man coming towards me. Distracted, I turned my head slightly to look over my shoulder and prepared to run, and as I did so, the ground gave way beneath me. I lost my grip on the phone, which popped out of my hand and sailed into the bushes nearby while I plunged headfirst into a shallow ditch. Scrambling to my feet, I glanced back. The man was watching me, his smile revealing far more than his words. He was definitely responsible for the dead body that lay at his feet. And he knew that I realized it. I ran. I ran like I had never run before, my heart pounding in my ears. Glancing back, I saw the massive silhouette of his pickup truck roar to life, its headlights illuminating the road. The predator was on the hunt. With a plan forming in my mind, I swerved into the woods near the road. Memories of countless childhood explorations helping me navigate the dense growth. I knew if I could reach the old chicken processing plant, I would be able to hide, at least for the time being. His truck's headlights now a distant glow. Inch by inch, I made my way to the factory. With every rustle, every snapping twig, my heart beat faster. I was pretty sure he was still following me. I slipped into the building, its decrepit walls offering bleak sanctuary. His truck came to a halt outside, its headlights glaring menacingly into the dark building. I stayed hidden, my heart pounding, listening intensely. Even though the plant had been closed down for a decade, it still smelt like a slaughterhouse, and the air had a slight metallic taste to it. Through a crack between the door and its frame, I could just barely see what was going on outside. The man's truck pulled up to the factory and stopped, and he climbed out of the vehicle. His heavy boots crunched the gravel. The factory lit up under his headlights. I had to get to a phone somehow and call for help. A memory flashed. Jared Perkins, one of the former chicken catchers, might still live close by. Last I had heard of him was from my uncle. My uncle delivered meals to the elderly and had remarked one time that old Jared was still in his home even though his wife had passed and his kids had moved out of the area. I always assumed that my uncle was just trying to freak me out, but he said that Mr. Perkins' hands were still stained red from all of his years at the chicken plant. I heard the door creak as the man reefed it open. He definitely knew that I was in here, and it was at this point that he let out a maniacal scream. No words, no commands, no requests, just a blood-curdling scream. He was pissed and his rage echoed through the factory. Silently, I slid out the back of the factory where the loading docks were located, and I quickly dove for cover in the nearby underbrush. He was inside the plant now, but must have been so engrossed in his search that he failed to notice me slipping away. If he had been able to keep his composure, he may have heard me unlatch the roll-up loading dock door and slide it open, just enough for me to scramble underneath it. However, it was clear, this guy was a ball of fury and he was boiling over. I crawled on my stomach until I thought it was safe to stand and make a run for it. Despite wanting to know if he had seen me yet, I dared not look back and instead bolted to Mr. Perkins' house. The house was shrouded in darkness when I made it to the front veranda. I opened the screen door and knocked and called out, "Hello? Mr. Perkins? I need help. It's Annie, Tommy Vandermeer's niece." Nothing stirred inside of the house. In the distance, I heard a vehicle coming up the road and decided that I needed to get inside. I ran around the house looking for a way in and noticed that there was a broken window on the west side of the house, behind an overgrown lilac bush. I used my sweater to cover my arm and broke out enough of the remaining pane of glass to allow me to slide inside. The house was dark and musty smelling and the air was heavy with dust. I was pretty sure that no one was still living there. My heart sunk as I pictured myself finding a phone that had been disconnected when whoever last lived here had left. I felt around in the house and considered trying to turn on a light to test if the electricity was still on, but I decided against it, in case that somehow alerted the man to my whereabouts. I located a phone in the living room. I took a deep breath and slowly reached for the receiver and held it to my ear. To my surprise, there was a dial tone. My trembling fingers dialed 911. As I recited my tale in hurried whispers, relief flooded me. Help was on the way. The operator kept me on the phone as I sat huddled in the corner of the room with my back against an old lazy-boy recliner that smelled faintly of stale urine. After a few minutes, the operator stated that there were 2 officers in the area and they disconnected the call, telling me to call back if I had any other updates. As the sirens wailed off in the distance, I let out a shuddered breath. But it wasn't over. Not just yet. The man's truck roared up to the house, his enraged screams echoing in the night. The truck lurched to a stop and then reversed back out of the driveway and peeled onto the gravel road. Sliding behind the curtains, I watched as his headlights swept past, the sirens close on his trail. The night wind whispered through the window I had broken. The chilling episode etched infamy into the tranquility I once loved. But for now, relief washed over me. I was safe. I had successfully escaped from the murderer. My relief was washed over by a sadness I now felt for the person who lay dead a few miles down the road. My sadness for the stranger was short-lived, as it was then that I heard a door creak open from the hall behind me. "Get the hell out of my house," came a gruff voice. "Mr. Perkins?" "Last warning," came the voice, and then I heard the distinct click of a shotgun snapping together, which no doubt had just been loaded. I ran for the door but tripped over an end table and crashed to the ground. "I'm sorry. I'm leaving," I yelled. "Or maybe you'd like to stay. There hasn't been a woman in this house for quite some time. There's nothing like the company of a pretty woman. Come back here and sit with me for a while." My focus remained on getting the hell out of there. I didn't turn to look at the man with the gun, but I could smell the smell of unkempt body odor. I was sure that in between words, the man was licking his lips. Something seemed creepy and disingenuous about his invitation to stay, and before I could think much more about it, I made it to the door, unlocked it, and ran back into the bush outside. I could still hear the distant sound of sirens, and I could taste my tears and sweat as I ran through the bush back to my home. I ran straight to my room and promptly collapsed on my bed. I was safe, and that's when I broke down. What were the motives of either of the people I had encountered? And why did the victim have to die? I don't think I will ever know. They never caught the man from the side of the road, and I never went near the Perkins house again. Something very unsettling occurred 3 months after that awful night. I came home from school to find an envelope on our front step. Someone had handwritten a grocery list of a dozen or so items on it, and they were all stroked out except for the word chicken, which was circled in red. Inside the envelope was my broken phone. Me and some friends had looked for it a couple days after I lost it, but it was nowhere to be found. I don't go anywhere alone anymore, and I no longer like the nighttime like I used to. I hope one day to be able to move on, but for now, I've resigned myself to traveling in packs and always locking the door and alarming our security system.